She tossed the last box into the trunk of her leased SUV with a thud that felt rehearsed. I watched from the porch, arms crossed, not because I was cold, but because I didn't trust them to stay still. "You'll miss me," she said. The words were smooth, practiced, like a line she'd been waiting to use for weeks. I didn't answer, just nodded, not out of agreement but acknowledgement of the performance, of the ending, of the silence I planned to maintain. Behind me, the movers stepped over the threshold, carrying out the last of the furniture she'd tagged earlier that morning with pink post-it notes. She hadn't asked which pieces were mine. She hadn't needed to. I hadn't been given a choice. The couch, hers. Dining set, hers. The bookshelf we built together over that sweltering weekend the AC broke, also hers. I let her take what she believed she owned. That belief was part of the plan. Mine, not hers. She didn't hug me, didn't even glance back. Just slipped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and reversed down the driveway like it wasn't her last time pulling out of it. Inside, the house echoed, not just from emptiness, but from the vacuum of all the conversations we never finished. The ones she walked out of halfway through. The ones I stopped starting. We'd lived under the same roof, but we hadn't shared a home in over a year. And yet the silence she left behind still managed to ring. I walked back into the foyer, stepped over the indent her boots had worn into the mat, and closed the door. Slowly. No slam. No final dramatic punctuation, just pressure, deliberate and firm. I didn't check my phone, didn't text a friend. I wasn't looking for sympathy or outrage. I was waiting, watching, because she wasn't gone, not really. Not in her mind. This was a reset, she'd said once during one of her passive-aggressive monologues about needing space to breathe. Like our mortgage had been airless, like my careful planning had become a noose. She thought I'd call by nightfall, that I'd panic when the lights didn't flicker on at 7 p.m. or when no one asked what I wanted for dinner. She thought I'd beg her to come back. She'd misread me so deeply it was almost insulting. She thought I'd miss her. I did, but not in the way she hoped. I missed the version of her who met me halfway at the farmer's market, who used to ask about my day with something resembling curiosity, who didn't roll her eyes when I explained the new budget spreadsheet or why it mattered to track spending together. But that version was gone long before her boxes were. Now, all that was left was the echo and the start of what came next, because this wasn't the end. This was the moment I got serious. She used to smirk when I opened the laptop at the kitchen table, the glow of the spreadsheet lighting up my face like it was some kind of obsession. "You're not curing cancer," she'd mutter, pouring wine into a glass too full to be casual. "It's just groceries." But it wasn't just groceries. It never was. It was about rhythm, about protecting what we were building, about not waking up one morning with the heat shut off and a foreclosure notice stapled to the door. I didn't think that made me controlling. I thought it made me responsible. She stopped contributing to our joint account sometime last spring, quietly, without fanfare. The automatic transfers just disappeared. I noticed it immediately, of course. I tracked everything, but I didn't say anything, not at first. Instead, I watched. Packages started arriving, always addressed only to her. Labels from companies we'd never used before. Subscription boxes, designer brands, spa kits. High-end yoga gear she never actually wore. "Self-care," she said when I raised an eyebrow one evening. "You wouldn't understand." Maybe I didn't. Maybe I thought caring for yourself meant doing right by the person who shared your name on a bank account, or the person who sat beside you every night trying to calculate how to keep both of your dreams intact without sinking the ship. But she stopped asking, stopped pretending we were collaborating. When she wanted something, she ordered it. When she booked trips, flights to coastal retreats or weekend getaways with women I'd never met, she paid from an account that wasn't ours, claimed it was her money, as if the absence of contribution gave her ownership over independence. "You act like we're broke," she snapped one night after I canceled the cable subscription. "We're not starving." She wore disdain like perfume, just heavy enough to make the air hard to breathe. Every compromise I made to stretch our savings she reframed as paranoia. When I stopped eating out for lunch, she rolled her eyes. When I negotiated down our car insurance premium, she scoffed. "You get off on this," she said once, tossing a receipt on the counter like it was contaminated. You like pretending you're the hero, but it wasn't pretense. I had spent years keeping our heads above water, refinancing, restructuring, renegotiating everything from utilities to credit card rates, while she drifted further into a life where consequences didn't land. And maybe that was the worst of it. Not the spending, not the disappearing act of her financial contributions, but the smirk, the performance of indifference. The way she made me feel like the one playing games with numbers when she was the one gambling with our future. She wasn't hiding the spending anymore, because she didn't think she needed to, because she believed I wouldn't do anything about it. She was half right. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to deliver ultimatums she could pretend not to hear, but I was documenting everything, because silence isn't the same as surrender, and spreadsheets don't forget. There's a moment in any slow unraveling when the person pulling the thread forgets the fabric was ever whole. That moment came on a Wednesday. I remember because I'd worked late to close out a quarter-end review. She was already home when I got in, barefoot in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone with a wine glass balanced precariously on the edge of the sink. She didn't look up when I walked in, didn't ask how the meeting had gone, just murmured something about Thai food delivery, already ordered, already charged to her card. I opened the fridge. We had leftovers from the night before. The kind of thing we used to stretch out across 2 meals when we were aligned, when we were still speaking the same language about value, about effort. I thought we were trying to stick to the meal plan, I said lightly, careful not to lace it with judgment. She didn't flinch. I'm paying for it. Not we. Not even I, just a declaration. This isn't your business anymore. It was the first time I realized she'd stopped seeing us as a team. And it hit harder than I expected, not like a betrayal, but like a reclassification. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a financial inconvenience she hadn't figured out how to exit cleanly from yet. That night, after she went to bed with her screen casting soft blue light across the sheets, texting someone she didn't bother hiding anymore, I sat down at the desk in the office we used to share. And I started pulling records, bank statements, credit card breakdowns, shared bills that had started to skew lopsided, subscriptions she opened under our address but routed to her accounts, Venmo histories that didn't align with what she'd told me. I didn't print anything. I just built a new spreadsheet, private this time. Every charge that didn't belong to us as a unit went into column B. Every unaccounted for transaction from her side of the ledger went into column C. I didn't do it to confront her. Not yet. I did it to understand the scope of what I was actually living inside. The next week, 2 more packages arrived. One from a luxury skincare company, one from a boutique retailer in LA. I took pictures of the labels before she saw them. Then she booked another trip. A solo reset, she called it. I need to get back to center. I didn't argue. I nodded. And the next morning, while she was out preparing for emotional realignment, I took screenshots of her travel confirmation. Pulled the airline, the destination, the seat number. No shared card used, just her private one. But the email still routed through our home Wi-Fi. She'd forgotten I worked in systems management before I shifted into consulting. She'd forgotten I knew how to trace data without tripping alerts. She'd stopped hiding because she stopped believing I was paying attention. But she'd made one mistake. She forgot I notice everything. And by the time she realized I wasn't blind, I'd already cataloged every receipt. This wasn't paranoia. It was record keeping. And soon it would become something she couldn't ignore. The budgeting spreadsheet had once lived on the fridge, clipped beneath a magnet shaped like a lighthouse, her choice, a souvenir from a trip we took before everything frayed. Now it lived only on my laptop, buried 2 folders deep. Not because I was hiding it, but because she no longer pretended to care. I can't believe you're still doing that, she laughed one evening, holding a wineglass like it was part of her uniform now. Are we auditioning for poverty? She meant it as a joke, but not really. It always came back to that tone, dismissive, detached, like the whole idea of planning for a shared future was embarrassing, something to outgrow like last season's shoes. I'd spent the afternoon running the numbers. Her name was still on the vehicle coverage I paid for, her phone plan. still bundled into mine, discounted only because I'd negotiated a loyalty plan she hadn't even noticed. I canceled cable the next day, quietly. The screen went dark during her evening scroll session and she looked up from the remote like she'd been unplugged from a lifeline. "You're kidding." "No," I said, standing in the kitchen. "I wasn't using it. We can stream anything we need." "We," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "You act like we're broke." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to argue. She had recast my discipline as dysfunction, turned responsibility into an aesthetic flaw. As if caring too much about where the money went meant I didn't care enough about her freedom. That was the new narrative. She was the spontaneous soul crushed by my spreadsheets, the vibrant one trapped in a monochrome marriage. I had become, in her eyes, the accountant of her captivity. And still, I didn't push back. Not out loud. Because by then, I had already started preparing my own form of liberation. One she wouldn't see coming. I scheduled a call with an attorney, not to file anything. Not yet. Just to understand what parts of the structure were already mine and which could be re-secured. I had the deed to the house in hand. Pulled utility bills into my name only. Ran the numbers on what it would take to sever every shared policy. And I flagged her most recent charge, a boutique retreat she'd booked in another state under her personal card. The kind of place that didn't offer group rates because they knew their customers weren't coming for company. I didn't need to ask why she was going. She was building her exit strategy, but not to leave, to stage a moment, create absence, manufacture longing. She wanted distance, not departure, silence, not separation. She believed she was walking away to be missed. That I'd sit here, surrounded by quiet and vacuumed floors, realizing what I lost. What she didn't know was that I'd already made peace with the silence. I was done trying to prove I wasn't the villain in a story she kept rewriting. And I was done watching my name attached to bills that funded her freedom while she treated mine like ballast. She wanted leverage, but all she gave me was clarity. And clarity, I was learning, was priceless. It was buried in a chat thread she thought I didn't have access to, a message sent at 2:14 a.m. while I slept in the room down the hall. "I just need a reset. He'll miss me. I'll move back once he softens." That was the sentence. No panic, no guilt, just calculation, like she was planning a business trip with a delayed return date. She hadn't left to start over, she'd left to win something. I hadn't meant to find it, but I wasn't surprised either. I'd noticed the pattern. The way she lingered in the hallway after phone calls. How her laptop always angled just slightly away. How she'd log out of apps faster than reflex should allow. So I started checking the router logs. She never changed her device name. Never realized her messages pinged through cloud backups still connected to our home network. And when I opened the synced browser session, there it was. Message after message, sent to someone listed only as Lena in her contact. I'm giving him space to realize what he lost. He's so rigid, always with his plans and graphs, I just want to live. And finally, I'll come back once the silence breaks him. He'll be grateful. It hit harder than I expected, not because I still hoped she loved me, but because she didn't even think I'd defend myself. She thought silence meant weakness. She thought restraint meant surrender. She didn't realize I was quiet because I'd already moved past wanting to win her back. That night I didn't sleep. I reorganized. I cleaned out the closet. I boxed what she hadn't taken and labeled it clearly, her belongings, not mine. No accusations, no dramatics, just a relocation of all the pieces she left behind because she expected to reclaim them later. She'd packed like someone planning a long weekend, not a life shift. Left her winter coat, her favorite mug, 3 pairs of boots lined by the door like they were holding her place. She believed time would soften me. She didn't realize time was the last thing she had. The next morning I called the locksmith, changed every entry point, the garage code, the keypad, even the side door bolt she liked because it didn't stick like the others. Then I called the bank. We dekept one shared account for bills. Her contribution had vanished, but her name remained. I closed it, redirected auto pays to the new account I'd opened weeks earlier. By 3 p.m., I had legal protections filed with the property office, confirming sole ownership on the house, something we'd agreed to during escrow but she'd forgotten about once the keys were in hand. She thought I'd plead when she returned, but I wasn't waiting for her to walk back through that door. I was preparing to make sure it wouldn't open, because when someone stages their exit to trigger grief, they never expect the silence to answer back with finality. She left on a Thursday. By Friday morning, I had the locks changed. No dramatics, no calls, just a quiet visit from a locksmith who didn't ask questions when I handed him the new hardware and said, "It's time." He had the job done in under an hour, deadbolts, garage reprogrammed, keypad reset. She left her key in the bowl by the front door, whether as a symbolic gesture or an assumption of access, I didn't know. But it didn't matter anymore. That key belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. I walked through the house slowly after he left, checking doors, testing handles. Not because I feared anything, but because I wanted certainty. In the office, I pulled the box with her documents, some tax forms, a few certificates, her expired passport, and sealed it. Labeled it with her name, taped it shut, not in anger but in resolution. Then I went to the storage unit. She'd assumed it was hers to use. She had filled it with off-season clothes, decorative items she rotated through the house like a seasonal catalog, and unopened purchases that had become too numerous to explain. She never asked how the unit was paid for, never noticed it was on my personal card, so I emptied it. Took what was mine, my grandfather's tools, a few boxes of old journals, the first edition books she never touched, and left the rest in labeled bins. I handed in the keys, closed the account. One less doorway for her to return through. Next, utilities. All transferred. Every bill routed to my name alone. Her email address removed. Her phone number erased from contact lists. No trace left behind that could be used to check in. She didn't know how quickly the architecture of a shared life could be dismantled by someone who had spent 2 years watching it slowly erode. She planned a soft return, walk through the door, toss a grin over her shoulder, unpack a few bags, and act like the absence had been mutual. But absence wasn't a strategy anymore. It was permanent. I didn't message her. Didn't answer the vague "thinking of you" text she sent the next evening, likely expecting a soft opening. Didn't respond when she said she'd forgotten her backup charger and asked if I'd be home Sunday night. Instead, my attorney responded, politely, directly, with a short confirmation that all questions regarding shared property or responsibilities should now be directed through official channels. She was stunned. I know because she tried to call afterward, twice. I let it ring out. She wasn't used to silence being enforced. She'd always used it like a tool, her silence, her exit, her stillness. A weapon to provoke reaction. But now the silence was mine, not passive, not hesitant. Her message came 2 days after my attorney replied to her first inquiry. "Can we talk about what's next?" It was short, stripped of punctuation, like she wanted it to sound casual, human, as if we'd simply lost our rhythm and needed to talk through it over coffee. But I didn't answer. My bank did. The joint account she'd assumed still existed, closed. The deed she thought was ours in spirit if not in legal form. Ray filed under my name with a copy of our original purchase agreement attached for reference. She hadn't read the documents when we bought the house. Said all the signatures gave her a headache, trusted me to handle the boring stuff. She'd spent years mocking the details. Now the details had written her out of the structure completely. There was no key for her to retrieve, no space reserved, no waiting room to be ushered into once she decided the performance had played long enough. She had planned to return like a missing season, expected the house to feel paused, not progressed, believed the echo of her presence would carry enough weight to reopen the door. But the echo had vanished, and in its place were contracts, confirmations, closure she never consented to but no longer had the power to refuse. She tried another angle, texted mutual friends, floated the idea that I'd acted fast, that maybe I was reacting from a place of pain, that she just needed time to clarify intentions. One of them forwarded her message to me, unsure how to respond. "I think he'll come around," she'd written. "He's hurt, but he's rational. He always overcorrects emotionally before leveling out." I read the line 3 times, not because it stung, but because it was so clinical. She didn't see me as a partner or a person trying to recover. She saw me as a system, predictable, process-oriented, waiting to be negotiated with once the grief softened my logic. She hadn't expected the grief to sharpen it instead. By the end of that week, I had unlinked our coverage accounts, reclaimed my emergency contact information from all service providers, reviewed every shared digital login, and changed every password she'd once had access to. It wasn't cruelty, it was cleanup. She used to joke that I treated our life like a business. She wasn't wrong, but businesses keep records. They protect their assets. They know when a partner has breached contract, not with force but with neglect. I wasn't grieving a person anymore. I was closing the books on a liability. And the ledgers were finally balanced. It wasn't until later that I understood she didn't leave for him, she left for leverage. The man wasn't a cause, he was a consequence, a placeholder in her negotiation strategy. I found the messages eventually, screenshots passed along by a friend who'd grown uncomfortable with the version of the story she'd been telling, the one she thought would never surface. Screenshots dated weeks before she moved out. "He won't really let me go," she'd written. "He's too scared of being alone. This will make him realize what he lost." There was a photo too, blurry, late night. Him in her passenger seat, head turned slightly away, not passionate, just convenient. A piece of evidence in a campaign she assumed would break me down. It didn't. I didn't spiral, didn't explode, didn't send long texts asking why or how long or whether it meant anything. Because I already knew it didn't. The damage wasn't about desire. It was about calculation. She didn't want out, she wanted control. Wanted to press against the boundary just hard enough to watch me flinch. To remind me that I could be replaced if I didn't make the concessions she now felt entitled to. But I didn't flinch, because I wasn't scared of being alone. What I feared, what I had avoided for too long, was living beside someone who used connection as currency, who used closeness like a transaction, who walked out not because she couldn't stay, but because she believed her absence had market value. She didn't fall into something new, she drafted it, designed it. A move on a board she thought I wasn't watching, but I was watching, and I wasn't negotiating. The day after I confirmed her exit was a strategy, not a departure. I backed up every receipt, not for court, not for revenge, just for clarity. Her spending timeline overlapped with his appearance, retreats, outfit hauls, wellness trips, all perfectly timed to coincide with his weekends off. She hadn't been escaping me. She'd been staging her freedom with someone who didn't realize he was a temporary argument in a longer conversation. I printed nothing, said nothing, because exposing it wouldn't have changed her story. It would have just complicated her performance. Instead, I filed it quietly, logged it where it belonged, not under heartbreak, but under evidence. And evidence, in the end, doesn't need emotion to be effective. It just needs to be seen. By Monday, I had a task list written in black ink on a legal pad, every shared tie still lingering, every loophole she might try to crawl through if her return didn't go to script. First, insurance. Our life insurance policies had been bundled through a joint account she no longer contributed to. I canceled mine, terminated hers, not out of spite, out of logic. I wasn't in the business of protecting someone who had already priced my silence. Next, the gym membership. The one she signed up for using our shared address billed through the household card. Gone. The loyalty program she used for retail discounts tied to our joint number. Unlinked. Then I went deeper. I reviewed every shared transaction from the last 18 months, categorized what was mine, what was ours, and what had always only served her, but at my expense. Meals booked under the pretense of networking dinners. Wellness charges labeled mutual self-care. Travel fees disguised as work retreats but matched perfectly to the destinations in her private messages. I didn't just flag them. I filed a retroactive expense audit, not to demand repayment, but to have documentation, to draw a line between what was real and what had been framed as real. And then I made the final adjustments, the ones that didn't show up in bank accounts but mattered more than any dollar sign. I removed her name from my contact info on personal records, replaced it with my brother's. I updated my estate preferences online. I removed her access to our shared cloud drive, calendar, and streaming accounts, not to punish her, but because I didn't want my life to feel like something she could still press resume on. These weren't emotional reactions. They were surgical removals. She had built a structure she believed couldn't function without her weight pressing down on it. But when I started lifting the pieces away, the house didn't collapse. It got quieter. Cleaner, better. Every shared thread she assumed was permanent had been tied loosely, because I had learned long ago that permanence isn't something you declare, it's something you earn. And she'd spent too long assuming her position was guaranteed. But no one stays on the lease after they've stopped paying rent, especially not when they thought the whole structure was theirs to re-enter at will. I wasn't locking her out. I was restoring the door to its original purpose, protection, not performance. It wasn't anger in her voice, it was confusion. That was what struck me when the voicemail came through. "I'm outside. Can we talk?" There was no demand, no apology, just a soft tremble under the surface, like she couldn't figure out why the scene wasn't unfolding the way she wrote it. But I didn't answer. She pulled into the driveway exactly 3 days after her last message. I watched from the upstairs window, not hidden but silent. She stepped out of the SUV in a coat she hadn't worn since last winter. The one she left behind assuming it would still be hanging in the entry closet, ready for her return. It was. She tried the key first. It didn't fit. Next, the keypad. She hesitated before punching in the code, muscle memory. Familiar pattern, but the green light didn't blink. She tried again, slower this time, the wrong number twice. Then her fingers dropped to her sides. I saw her glance up at the windows. She looked for movement, for signs, for any indication that I was behind the door, ready to open it and resume our scheduled reconciliation. Then she stepped to the garage, pulled at the side panel, nothing. The remote clipped to her visor, useless. And finally she turned to the front door. No knocking, just a slow realization that her plan had expired. Taped to the wood was a single page. Her posture shifted when she saw it. I don't know what she expected, a plea maybe. A summary of mistakes we could circle back to in therapy. Some version of the past folded neatly into an apology, but all it said was, "You said I'd miss you, I missed the stress." No name, no signature, no date, just an answer she never thought I'd be able to give. She stood there for a long time, read it twice, folded it slowly like it might change in her hands. Then she looked around, as if the driveway might offer context. As if the yard she once criticized for being too uniform might offer a clue about how she lost control of the ending. But the house was quiet. Not cold. Not bitter, just done. She didn't cry, didn't yell, she just stood still like a performer who missed their cue and realized the stage lights weren't coming back on. Eventually she left. No voicemail this time, just silence. And that silence, for once, wasn't mine to explain. The silence didn't stay private for long. Mutual friends started reaching out. Soft messages first, then blunt ones. "Hey," she said, "things ended fast. Is everything okay? She told me you locked her out, that true." But by then I had receipts, screenshots, dated emails, archived messages, not leaked, just visible. The ones she sent to Lena planning her return, the ones to him, whatever he was, mocking my silence, predicting my collapse. I didn't blast them out. I didn't try to smear her. I just stopped shielding her. When one friend pressed harder, saying maybe I'd acted harshly, I forwarded the message where she said, "He won't let me go, I know how to get him back." No commentary, no framing, just the evidence. Silence on the other end. One by one, the people she'd leaned on for sympathy began pulling away, not from loyalty to me but from discomfort with her script. It didn't match the facts. It didn't hold up under daylight. And she couldn't control the timeline anymore. That was the thing she hadn't planned for, exposure. Not scandalous, not public, just quiet unraveling, private doors closing. She hadn't expected people to look at the story twice. Hadn't expected anyone to ask why she packed like she was coming back. Hadn't expected that when the messages surfaced, her words would say more than mine ever could. She wasn't returning to a man. She was returning to paperwork. And that's what she never understood. This was never about heartbreak. It was about foundation, about who did the work, about who stayed when it got hard, and who walked out with a suitcase full of assumptions. She lost the narrative not because I stole it, but because I stopped playing the part she'd written for me. And once the silence held, the truth did too.